let's start.
Fire it up.
Fire it up. Fire it up. Yeah, okay. You're still running off of that Halloween high, I guess.
Yeah.
So my kids didn't share any of their candy with me. Can you believe that?
See,
Mark.
Yeah.
You're bigger than them.
But they're black belts in karate, so
whatever.
Of course, I could sit on them. I've got about 100 pounds on them, so I'll just fall on them.
Yeah.
It takes care of that.
That's what I used to spar when I was in college with some guys who were Taekwondo people, and skill-wise, I could not beat them. So I would let them kick me, and as soon as their foot touched me, I would grab their leg and fall on them.
Nice.
So if you're going by points, they would always win. But if this was a fight to the death, I mean, I had 120 pounds on the biggest guy. So it's like, great, you kicked me. It hurt a little bit, but now I have your leg.
And I'm going to lay on you.
I'm going to lay on you.
Nice.
And I wrestled in high school, so I marginally know what I'm doing.
And here we are in the spoiler room tonight, talking about some of our special abilities as we kick off our super month here, where we're going to be discussing superhero films, both popular and ones you may not have heard of, or those of a different color. And tonight I've got a great spoiler room crew with me to discuss our first film, which is appropriate for Super Month. It's called Super. And in the room tonight, first off, is the BFD himself, Mr. Glenn Bittner's here. Hello, Glenn. How super are you today?
Shut up, crime.
And next to Glenn, back in the spoiler room, is the man, David. Hello, David. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Glad you could join us for this. And next to him, the Bowtie Man himself, recovering after his new horror film festival. It is Mr. Paul Salzer. Hello, Paul.
Hey, how are you guys?
Glad to have you here. Do you got your cape on and nothing else?
Cape and bow tie, man.
Oh my Lord. I don't know why I even asked. I don't even know why I asked these questions.
It's the naked justice.
Oh, Lord. You just show up and people go screaming into their jail cells. That's what happens. At least that's what happens to me every time I show up naked. Anyway, today we're going to talk about Mr. James Gunn's feature superhero film called Super. Now, Super here was James Gunn. I was looking at this. This is only his second full length feature here, and it's definitely an unusual superhero film. Does anyone want to try to summarize this, Glenn?
Oh yeah,
go for it.
So, regular run of the mill kind of not great, as in not cool guy. His life kind of sucks. To a degree. I mean, his wife is freaking Liv Tyler.
Right.
But, he's Rainn Wilson, playing a typical Rainn Wilson type character. So, of course, she falls for someone else, a drug dealer played by the rather charismatic Kevin Bacon. He kind of has a psychotic break and becomes this kind of vigilante called the Crimson Bolt. And he goes around and hits people with a pipe wrench. For not just drug dealers. I mean, dude skipped in line, hit him with a pipe wrench. So he's not really a hero. He's just kind of a crazy guy with a wrench.
And a suit.
He's got a suit, of course, and he gets a sidekick because every hero needs a sidekick. Played wonderfully by Ellen Page. Liv Tyler's the wife. Ellen Page plays Libby, his sidekick. And yeah, I mean, he's, wants to win back his wife and defeat crime at the same time.
Yes, he does. Now, this came out, I believe, in the same year as Kick-Ass. And yeah, Glenn, what was your feelings on Super when you first saw this film?
I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was actually really well done. The thing is, you have so many superheroes in the genre who, because of something that happens, a lot of them they have their little, mental breakdowns, and is what drives them to become a superhero. Batman does it. You have so many people that have something. It's usually a family member dying. This one, it's his wife leaving, but it's like they have these psychotic breaks and they turn out just fine. It's like, I have an emotional breakdown. I'll just learn martial arts and, spend $88 billion on the cave, and I'm going to fight crime. Where this is a much more realistic, where the guy's like, I'm going to go fight crime because I'm kind of insane. So it's, it's someone who's obviously deluded and delusional in their abilities, as well as kind of what's going on. But it covers it really, really well. I mean, this is, dark comedy.
Yeah.
And it's fairly dark. I mean, it's not like, we're going to be a little serious here and there. I mean, this, some shit happens in this. So I actually loved it. I watched it. I had gotten it. I saw it in the theater. One of the art house cinemas down here in Milwaukee. And then as soon as it came out on video, I picked it up and I watched it again because I liked it so much.
Awesome. Was that, did it play at the Oriental?
It was either the Oriental or the Downer, one of the two.
One of the two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oriental's great for catching those indie art house pictures. Yeah. And David, how about you when you first saw Super?
This Sunday.
That was the first time?
It was the first time.
Oh, and what'd you think
my
about
collection since it came out, and I think Kick-Ass definitely was the one that everyone wanted to see first, and all of a sudden you said, "Hey, we're doing a Super episode." I was like, "Cool, I can finally watch it." So, to say the least. I mean, I remember seeing a few episodes of what was it, The Office?
Yeah.
The main character was on, and I remember how funny that he was then, and he kind of reminded me of his character then. But it was definitely, I mean, it's not a far cry from the idea that was in Hero at Large,
mm-hmm.
from like the late 80s or
right,
whatnot, with Three's Company guy, because he definitely wants to be a superhero. So, but he just ends up being, like Glenn said, a crazy guy going around popping everyone again with a wrench.
Yeah.
Suddenly he has several things happen to him, including his
wife leaving.
His wife leaving him, and
his job kind of sucks.
Sidekick. His job kind of sucks, so it's just...
So you enjoyed the film then?
I enjoyed it, especially the second half. I mean, it was kind of a slow build-up, but I loved the play-by-play with him and the chick in the comic book store,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, when they're going through the comics and they're trying to pick out, because he was looking for inspiration for him, and they're trying to pick out which superheroes to be inspired by.
Oh, yes, and definitely when she looks so young and he looks so old, it's...
Yeah, you kind of got that little creepy thing going on. Just a little. Paul, how about you at Super the first time you saw it?
The first time I saw it, I remember not liking it very much. Yes, I admired the filmmaking and the technique, but I just didn't like the story. I didn't like the characters, because at the time I really wanted something to be heroic. I wanted these characters to have the comic book feel, the larger than life superhero thing, and these guys were just this, these guys are my neighbors type of, and so I didn't like it the first time. However, watching it for the show this week, I actually did pick out a lot more of the nuance, and I have to say I did enjoy it a lot more the second time through.
Would you say partly you may have enjoyed it because after seeing the two Guardians of the Galaxy films, you may have gotten a gist of James Gunn's sense of humor?
Well, honestly, no.
Really?
It wasn't because of the humor or anything like that. I think it was more of the fact that I found first time I was watching through it, I think I had this expectation of the traditional superhero type story.
Sure.
And because I didn't get that, instantly my mind shut down and I was looking for these little flaws. And then it was like, well, that's not heroic. Well, that's not heroic. That's definitely not heroic. And so the second time through it was like, well, I didn't have to think about that. It was like looking for the traditional things that I find in stories, which is how does this apply to my life? And by doing that, I found little things that I actually did love about this film.
Okay. I'll have to edit this part out later because if you start running around hitting people with a pipe wrench, I don't want any idea of premeditation going on. Just putting that out there, Paul.
I don't own any tools except for maybe a screwdriver. So
I've got a couple pipe wrenches.
Okay, well, it's only an hour and a half away.
If you get inspired, just let me know. I got a couple of them.
All right.
A little tiny one too, so that you can hit mice with if you want.
Criminal mice, man.
Criminal mice. Those evil criminal mice. I tell you, man, they're plotting something.
Those three-blind mice, they're always plotting.
Yeah, they just don't know where they're going. And this was the first time watch for me as well. First time I watched it last night. Again, it was one of those on my list. And one of those things where you flip through, you're like, yeah, you see it on Netflix. You're like, yeah, next time. So part of the reason when I put this up for a vote, everybody voted for films they wanted to talk about, and the most votes won. And I was glad this one won because I've heard a lot of people reference it and talk about it. And, I'm a big James Gunn guy because he's, even though he's directed a couple of very successful Marvel Universe films, he still doesn't seem to have gotten too Hollywoodized yet. So I like his style. And so I was like, okay, now I finally got a reason to sit down and force myself to watch this sooner rather than later. And I dug it quite a bit. I really liked the dark angle to it, the dark tone throughout. It stays consistent. What more importantly, though, I think that separates this, and I'm probably going to bring up this comparison a couple times tonight, just because the two films are similar on the surface, but I actually enjoyed Super more than Kick-Ass. I will say, don't get me wrong, I love Kick-Ass, but I loved Super, but for a completely different reason than I loved Kick-Ass. And mainly it was because of Rainn Wilson's character and just the crazy crap that happens in this film. When he gets inspired to do superhero things, he gets inspired by this cheesy, and I do mean cheesy, religious superhero show with the Holy Avenger played by the one and only Nathan Fillion. Oh my Lord, Paul, the Holy Avenger, and the religious angle that turned out to be kind of the motivation for the superhero. What'd you think of that?
I enjoyed that character because, again, that to me is the kind of the quintessential type of superhero. I do like the extremes, and I think when you get too real, it throws me out of my fantasy element. And so, yes, Nathan Fillion was probably one of the highlights the first time I watched it. And the second time it was just like, yeah, I really dug the character. He was the over-the-top superhero that I really wanted. I could watch an entire film with that, I think.
Well, what'd you think though of the religious, basically the religious motivation for our hero to become a superhero? Did that surprise you a bit?
No, because it to me, the Frank character seems like all he ever did was go throughout his kind of life through all these like different addictions and things like that. So this became like his wife was his addiction, and then after his wife left him, so he had to find a new addiction, and that became the religion, and then the religion then became superheroism, and it just to me it was just a logical progression of his character.
the Holy Avenger episodes were pretty funny. David, what do you think about the fact that did that surprise you at all a little bit that there was this bit of a religious spin with his motivation to become a superhero?
It did on at first because all of a sudden it just went into this whole like synopsis of like his background. All of a sudden he gets. His brain gets open. You see these Lovecraftian creatures or tentacles come towards his head. It opens up his brain, and he gets touched by the finger of God.
It's a great sequence. I love the special effects there too.
It was just corny, but I for some reason I loved that scene. But to me, the Holy Avenger kind of reminds me of Bible Man.
Mm-hmm. I actually have that VHS. I have a VHS. I do. I have it somewhere because I buy it.
I believe that there were like tons of episodes of those things, but all of a sudden, I just every time the Holy Avenger came on and it gave that pointer out to Frank as his character progressed. I just kept thinking it's Bible Man
with a pipe wrench. Glenn, how about you with the religious spin and his motivation to become a superhero? Surprising at all?
Not really. I think it's very easy to because it's you want answers, and I mean, a lot of people, where do a lot of people find answers? They find it in religion.
Mm-hmm.
So having that aspect in there actually makes total sense.
Yeah, and it surprised me because of a film like this. I didn't expect that element to be in here because let's face it, films like this, you don't quite usually get that angle or that perspective in there where, the religious part of it, with it not being, this God's not dead 5, type of angle. So I guess for me, for a popular film like this to have that at its kind of its core for his motivation, just surprised me. But in a good way, I was surprised. And then there was the tentacle part. Glenn, what'd you think about the whole tentacle part? How'd you think for a film of this? I mean, it's made on a limited budget. So what'd you think the special effects there?
Effects are fine for the type of movie it is. So it didn't bother me at all. I thought it was fine.
Well, it kind of made sense though that it was tentacles because he had turned on TV and immediately the first show he hits is tentacle porn. So
yeah.
Which again surprised me, like, oh, okay. Here's kind of that freedom of being still kind of indie filmmaker at this point. He just
but that also had to make you kind of think whether or not he was crazy or if he was actually seeing it, because did he have because he saw it on the television a few hours ago or a few minutes ago, was his mind then sort of interpreting the world through that filter, and I think it made me like guess the state of Frank. It's like, is he really crazy or is he not crazy? And I think that was a great scene to put the tentacles in.
Well, then the other question too is, it doesn't come up too much through the film when we're first introduced to him. What if it was a different superhero versus the Holy Avenger? Would that still maybe have inspired him? And it's just the fact that it was the Holy Avenger show he turned on that inspired him more. David, would you say he would have got inspired regardless, possibly? Because it was on the verge of breaking to begin with. So
I think if you put like a polar opposite character of the Avenger, like someone like a devilish type thing, he might have.
Mm-hmm.
Thing.
Yeah,
when you think about the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, a concept. If it were more of like a devilish type character, I could see that going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could.
Where all of a sudden, like it's the unholy Avenger, so to speak. So.
Glenn, do you think that he would have been inspired anyway if he came, depending on a different show, like say the Unholy Avenger, or do you think religion was still kind of essential to his character?
I think it was fairly central to his character. I mean, you could have done something else. I don't know what that would have been, but there could have been something else. But religion works really well for it.
Right. And Paul, how about you? Do you think that worked well? Do you think our character Frank would have been inspired by something else, or
oh hell yeah. I think if he would have been watching Iron Chef, he would have been having a showdown with Jacques to win his life, win his wife back with food, because that's the type of character that Frank Darbo is, that he would have taken anything and just because he wanted to win his wife back. It would have been great. It would have been great.
Well, he was a chef, and he made pretty good eggs, according to Jacques, who ends up showing up at his house. This is the guy who takes away his girl, and Jacques is played by Kevin Bacon. And Kevin Bacon as Jacques, I tell you.
He was last minute, too.
Was he last minute?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. you know who he originally cast?
Who?
JCVD.
No way.
Jean-Claude Van Damme was supposed to play Jacques.
Oh wow. Hence the name was fitting. That's why I thought it was kind of funny. Kevin Bacon's name is Jacques. But
yeah.
Wow. What'd you think of Kevin Bacon's character in this and his performance, Glenn? It was fun, wasn't it?
Oh, it was very fun. And I think you can tell that he's having fun with the role as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because he usually gets kind of the clean-cut guy. I always thought he did better in kind of his darker roles, and this is definitely a dark role for him.
Yeah.
But he's, like you said, he's charismatic, too, though.
Yeah. And it works well. It works well, especially for what you're trying to do with the character. I mean, obviously, if he was just if you had Steve Buscemi as this, I'm gonna be like, really, Liv Tyler left. I mean, yeah, Rainn Wilson's not like amazing, but you left for what is it about? I mean, is it just money? Because it's more. I mean, that's got to be what it primarily is, right?
It's just the drugs. It's the drugs that they keep giving her more and more of. Which makes you wonder if at first it was voluntary and then after that it wasn't, but with her character too. But Jacques, you can tell definitely Kevin Bacon is having a blast with this. David, how'd you feel about Jacques and Kevin Bacon's performance?
I think that, like Glenn said, he was having fun with it. I mean, the fact that when Frank was messing with his car, and they almost had like a high school, showdown. Where not the kind of hitting on my car to that.
Don't touch my car again. And he puts his finger on it.
Yep.
Because God's finger touched him, I tell you.
Yeah. So God's finger touched him, and his finger touched Jacques' car. And there you go. The circle of life. No, just kidding. Paul, how about you with Jacques and Kevin Bacon? Did you think Jacques made a good villain for opposite our Frank Darbo?
The first time, no. Second time, yes. Second time because it was like, oh, I realized his name is also a play on words, because you could have taken it as a typical high school teen movie where you get the couple that's broken up. The one girl falls in love with the Jacques, and he goes off and tries to win her back, and then meanwhile he ends up having this strange, weird relationship with another character that could be potentially a better, like, frame of soulmate type of thing, but that all falls apart, and then at the very end it's like everybody goes off and either is dead and has their own different lives and stuff. So to me that was a really enjoyable thing, and that's why when I realized his name was Jacques and sort of pushed it on to be Jock, I enjoyed it a lot more. And also too, like you guys said, he is very charismatic, and because of that, I also looked at him as, what if Frank was truly insane and this guy was actually a nice guy, and this was just Frank's filter kind of interpreting all, because for the most part he was kind of a nice guy up to a certain point. Like the very end to me was the only time that I really saw a really bad thing about Jacques come out, the Kevin Bacon character. So I did enjoy it the second time. The first time he was like, but what a bad, he's a bad villain. He's not even worth it. But second time through, it was like, oh my God, what if he is the type of villain that is the superhero is crazy, and this is the villain that superhero deserves.
He definitely is a unique guy, and I thought he was a good counter to Frank Darbo's crazy, because Jacques has a little underlying crazy, but at the same time there's a little bit of softness to him too. It was really unusual character for him, because with Sarah, Liv Tyler's character, we get that near the end where the big drug lord guy may take her, and you just get a moment with Jacques where you can almost tell he almost has a feeling for her. Like, he does, but he's like, the business is more important. You know what? It's time to move on, because he had his hanger-ons, which are James Gunn regulars, Sean Gunn, Michael Rooker, who we've seen later on in we would see later on in films, just like Nathan Fillion, because he put all his buddies in his films, because that's what James Gunn does. And I liked his hanger-ons as well. They don't get a whole lot of time, but Michael Rooker gets a bit of a scene, gets a vicious murder too. Holy crap. Speaking of murders, Frank Darbo, his Crimson Bolt, he's not the kind of let's wrap them up and give them to the police in our spider web. He's a destroy guy. What'd you think of the Crimson Bolt, David, as a character, as a superhero? I mean, this guy, he's like the Punisher in tights.
It's like he had a falling down episode, I mean, he just cracked when he put on the suit. And I mean, but respect, he learned that he had to have a weapon,
right?
And he was going and looking at all these different, comic books or whatnot. He realized that he wanted weapons that weren't guns or whatnot at first, but he wanted to be unique too,
right? Yeah,
he ended up having the TNT in the end, and yeah, the Acme TNT for the most part. Of course, he did have a gun eventually, but for the most part, he went relatively old school superhero kind of without gadgets.
Right. Yeah, it was just him. Well, and
just
his
nuke him on the
for a little bit anyway.
Yeah, for a little bit.
For a little bit.
That's the thing. Cartwheels for only a little bit.
Yeah. Glenn, what'd you think of the Crimson Bolt though as a character, as a superhero? I mean, he's awkward, he's a little stumbling, but he's also got a bit of Punisher in him, doesn't he?
Yeah, and because he's insane like the Punisher. He's broken. Broken makes a good hero.
Broken usually does make a good hero, and it makes it so. The question is, since he is broken, he has this. Then he starts to question what he's doing, and he then is enforced by his hanger-on Ellen Page playing Libby, who is crazy in her own right, isn't she, Glenn?
Oh my, she's freaking batshit.
Do you think that she actually hurt more than helped Frank?
I mean, from a mental standpoint, yes. Because I mean, she, for lack of a better term, she enabled him.
Right. Because.
So I mean, yeah.
Because after he meets her, and the bad guys amp up. He realizes, he went to go to the compound the first time and gets shot, but he starts to question why he's actually doing it. And I think because of her is why he amps it up to actually doing weapons. Because like you said, she's being an enabler. Paul, how about you with Libby and the Crimson Bolt? Do you think that she kind of pushed him further than he may have gone on his own?
I'm sure that was the case, but I actually admire her for that. I enjoy people that have passion in their work, and she truly had passion. She loved being a superhero kid sidekick. So, my heart goes out to her. Love you, Bolty. Love you.
Bolty loved more than just being a superhero. David, how about you with Libby, aka Bolty? You think she kind of enabled Frank to go further than he probably would have on his own?
I think she definitely enabled him to an extent. I mean, he was having somewhat of an issue finding a way to get to Jock.
Right.
I mean, he obviously after that first run in. I mean, of course, they did have an odd, relationship. At least, I mean, I don't know whether you could call it a fling sidekick, but
fling. She attacks him and basically, basically rapes him on the couch.
I mean, what? I mean, look at that. I mean. You have to think that is that kind of what was egging him on to begin with? I don't know, but I think her death inspired him to go more kamikaze.
Yeah, and that big showdown where he gave her Wolverine claws, which were badass, actually.
Yeah,
those claws were badass. Yeah, that final scene, because of course it's a superhero film. You finally get this final showdown where he comes back after getting shot. He's got his help of his sidekick for a limited time. He's amped up his weaponry and his bombs. Paul, what'd you think of this final showdown at the compound?
It was the logical progression of his state. I mean, he kept ramping it up, ramping it up, ramping it up. So it made sense that he ratcheted up to higher weapons, and it made sense that people got hurt. I mean, throughout the entire movie, I think that Mr. Gunn wanted everybody to realize that being superhero-esque isn't always going to be the comic book thing that I love. But if you try to bring it into the real world, this is why you can't have it in the real world, because people get hurt. And that's why you got people that got hurt and very visually getting hurt. Oh my goodness. But you enjoy it because it's that you get that combat, you get that comic book fight scene, the action scene that you would expect in an action film and in a comic, superhero film. But then you got to see the flip side of it, because it's like, oh, well, the bombs don't just, throw the people, away. It actually blows them to pieces.
many pieces. And yeah, the death of Libby, as David listed, because yes, this is a spoiler room, folks, she just doesn't die. She gets half her face blown off.
Yeah.
That surprised the hell out of me. Glenn, how'd you feel about this final showdown here? Did it seem like he on purpose took it up to more of a comic book battlefield, but he still had the brutality in there, but it really seemed a little bit different in tone versus what we had seen up to then from our Crimson Bolt, didn't it?
Oh yeah, it definitely really goes up an extra notch at this point. And I like that, in that it's, that's the thing, is that most superhero films, the consequences are, it's like you might get beat up. Right. And in this one, it's like, it's the number of things where I see both villains and superheroes in your typical comic book type stuff. It's like, dude, can't a SWAT sniper just take him out? Like the Joker. He's just a crazy dude. Yet, he's not bulletproof. Why can't a cop just shoot his ass? And, even Batman, it's like, okay, he's got his, his armored suit or whatever. It's like, dude, it's like Deadshot, who like never misses, puts a bullet on his nose. That's it. Batman's dead. There's no armor there. In the nose, hits the back of the skull where that armor is, bounces around and scrambles his brain. No more Batman.
Or through the eye.
Yeah, or the eye. Either one. It's good to see that there are that there's actual repercussions for doing things. You're taking on freaking drug dealers when you're just some dude and some girl who are not superpowered. You don't have superpowers. You're just people.
Right.
Bad things happen to people.
The only edge they have is the fact that they're crazier than those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their superpower, is insanity at that point. Is the fact that they're just doing shit that these guys don't expect, because normal people don't do that sort of thing, like have claws on their hand. David, how about you at the final battle here? Did you think they kind of ramped it up to more of a comic book level versus the rest of the film?
I think they definitely notched it up a bit. And I mean, yeah, it didn't have the bang pow, comic book, extravaganza, where it was just, you saw a little comic book bubble saying, and this is what happens next, Right. But I think the weapons were ammoed up, the intensity of it.
The pipe bombs.
I thought those were fantastic, actually.
Those were, yeah. So, we've kind of run through this film, this hyper extreme mature superhero film. So I want to go down the line now and see if anybody here has any topic they want to talk about that we may not have touched on. David, how about you go first? You got anything that you maybe wanted to ask that we didn't talk about yet? If not, that's okay. I was
trying to think of something throughout the whole thing. No, I guess I don't. I'll think about it for a moment. Let the others
Right. Glenn, do you have anything?
My thought is, so like you have Ellen Page's Libby character, and you don't often see, especially in superhero stuff, normally if there's a girl sidekick, it's to a female hero, and normally a male hero has a male sidekick. Do you think they did that intentionally, or?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Paul, what do you think?
I know. Way back, the original Robin was supposed to be a girl, and they ended up going with a boy because they felt it would be too weird having this adult man with this young girl.
Well, especially since there was already a Batgirl.
Right.
Yeah,
but they've had female Robins though too. You know, later on, yeah.
Later
when
on,
they started
did, yes.
when they started out, they did not. So yeah. So what was the? So you wanted me to?
So Glenn was asking, do you think it was intentional they made his sidekick female rather than male?
I think so, because I think it was able to show the audience that you didn't need the stereotypes to have an interesting comic book story, I guess. Again, the first time was different for me. The second time I got to enjoy it more, and I got to see that the little nuance of the interaction between them. I think the idea of having the sidekick, for better word for it, rape the mentor. It was a weird and powerful scene, because you have to think about it in terms of, in the comic book world, it's usually always the mentor always doing, telling the sidekick what to do. And this type of thing, it was just like the sidekick was living out her basically hero fantasy to the extreme of wanting to love the mentor and of attacking him and making him feel weak, like he was the sidekick, And it was just a very weird type of, it was just a hugely powerful scene. And I think, yes, it was important that they had an actress of Helen Page's caliber doing the scene, and just also having her kind of play with the stereotype, the expectation that most people, the fanboys, would have. They just said, nope, I'm going to take what you believe and prove to you that it doesn't have to be. And they made a really enjoyable scene out of it. Well, the scene itself wasn't enjoyable. It was
yeah.
but
we know what you mean.
Okay, thank you.
No, we got you, Paul. We got
Right.
you. No, Paul is saying what happened in the scene was enjoyable.
Yes.
It was awkward as fuck.
But the meaning behind it was powerful, and
right. The message behind it, but it was still really freaking awkward. David, how about you? Do you think it was intentional that they made the sidekick a female?
To be honest, I actually don't remember that many female sidekicks with a male, to be precise. I mean, I know that it hasn't really been,
right,
to have in a superhero film. I don't think there has been.
No. Well, I mean, outside of some of the female Robins for a short amount of time, but for your regular, long-running sidekick, yeah, I don't think so either. So do you think this was kind of intentional, James Gunn turning that on its head, so to speak?
And because I think that might have been the age where they were starting to have more, female roles for women in superhero films. Right. So I think that was a definite game changer for this film, because I don't think it was done before, not to that extent.
And not in a superhero film, to be sure. Outside of, I mean, the Batman Forever and Batman and Robin films. Where even then she wasn't really the regular sidekick. Batgirl was on the side, but yeah, it was something interesting to see in a superhero film like this. I mean, we had it in Kick-Ass, which is interesting how these two movies parallel.
To me, Batgirl in the Batman series was more of a sidekick to Robin than it was to Batman.
Yeah, that's true.
To me, so she was more of a sidekick to a sidekick, which wasn't done before either. But
and if you look at Kick-Ass, which came out at the same time, like I said, it's interesting how these two parallel each other, but at the same time they're different films because you had Hit Girl, who was, you almost felt in that film she wasn't the sidekick so much as just another superhero. Whereas in this one, Libby is definitely trying to be the sidekick because of a hero fantasy.
Well, she was an amped up fangirl of comic books, but then I think she became a amped up fangirl or groupie, so to speak, of the Crimson Bolt. But then when she suddenly realized it was the Crimson Bolt, that was when her obsession with him took over. And she wanted
right.
So
another theme of addiction, as Paul alluded to earlier.
Exactly.
So, excellent question. I think is fully intentional. Definitely, Glenn, and it was him exploring it. And I don't think he was exploring it to show, well, this is why you can't. I think it was just turning it, especially for superhero films, especially when this came out, just presenting something, a different situation. Like, because one of the things I felt that was different between this one and like Kick-Ass, and I know I keep coming back to it, but very similar, is that this one really felt more grounded in reality than Kick-Ass was in many ways. And so, even when she's trying to be seductive Libby, it was awkward because she obviously doesn't do that often. Act like that. You could tell she was trying to play this role, instead of just being her. And it was an interesting exploration to see that between these two. So yeah, that's a really good question, Glenn. What do you think? Do you think it was intentional as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think just with the way they did everything, it had to have been an intentional choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you change it, it drastically changes the story. It changes his character.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Especially if it's just a male sidekick, it definitely changes the character.
And I would have to say it would if they would have put a male character in there, he would have had to be more funny-dovey than he was.
Right. Right. This way, Frank can be the funniest guy there in front of the camera. So, Paul, how about you? Do you have a question or topic?
I did. I wanted to know what your takeaway was from the film.
Oh, like the overall message or meaning, or
what message did you get from the film? Because obviously, when I watched it the two different times, I got two different takeaways.
Sure.
And so, I would be very interested to see if you guys had something similar to what I did or something totally different. I would love if it was something totally different, because it'd be cool.
David, what was your takeaway from this film?
My takeaway from this film?
Yeah, like the overall message. What was your takeaway from Super?
The fact that that sometimes that there are no happy endings. That you can that you can do anything in the name of religion. And I guess my overall take on it was that basically anyone could probably be a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's you don't always just take that one day and decide, I see all this bad in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and take up the reins and think up of a crazy name for a superhero for yourself, and then go out and just bash everyone. You know, hey, someone stands up to be that insane man.
Someday that may be you, David. No, just kidding.
Except I probably will not make headlines.
You'll be more stealthy, like a ninja. Ninja Dave. There we go. Glenn, how about you? What was your takeaway from a super?
That to be a hero, you got to be somewhat crazy, or a lot crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can definitely see that. You have to have something wrong with you to be a hero.
Yeah.
Well, to be a successful hero, I think. Because crazy people, you know, they're committed. No pun intended, but Paul, what was your takeaway from it after you saw it the second time?
The second time, I totally missed this the first time. But the second time I caught the ending where he's mentioning that the story is really about Sarah, and that so when I looked at the film from that point of view, it was like, oh wait, what if this was kind of a redemption story for her? This wasn't a superhero origin story. This was about a woman who had problems in her life, and that her mind was basically split into different parts, and you had Frank kind of representing one part of it, fighting with Jacques, which represented another part of it, and then you had all these little sub things of all the characters that were else in there. But those two major things were conflicting each other, and only when Frank was able to defeat Jacques was she able to take her life, turn it around, and then become the woman that she's supposed to be. I missed that totally the first time. And the second time, that was my takeaway. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is a really interesting, thought-provoking story. And it gives me that kind of a happy feeling that, yeah, we all struggle with making these types of decisions throughout our lives. And sometimes we do need to, you know, we look to God, we look to comic books, we look to, you know, different people to try to bring our lives, give it some meaning. And then only when we finally do take the step where one side beats out the other, do you finally make the life that you want. You know, she ends up with kids of her own, you know, and in the very end, it was kind of like, okay, Frank is looking on all these memories that he's kind of, you know, had. And I was looking at it as well. These are kind of like her memories too, you know. It was just kind of a happy feeling for me. It's like, that's my takeaway.
Yeah, it's similar takeaway. Though while we were talking tonight, I had this idea, and it's probably completely off and out there, but I just want to put this out there, and you guys can respond or not. I'll ask your opinions on, but what if this whole movie is actually mostly inside Frank's head, and it's his superheroing up what actually is about his failed marriage, where he actually has caught his addictive wife with a boyfriend, and it's just a story about him winning her back, and all the superhero stuff was actually in his brain, And so in the end, this actually takes a mundane story. Well, not mundane, but just a story, your average story of a couple having problems. They both finding someone else and possibly cheating on the other, hence her with Jacques and him with Libby, and them coming back together. And then they realize that, you know what, this isn't working out and we need to move on with our lives. But none of the superhero stuff actually happens. It's all in his brain to cope with the things he's dealing with. Paul, what do you think?
Very good possibility, yes.
It was something I was thinking about more and more as you guys were talking about it. Glenn, what do you think? You think you could look at it as he's made up a lot of this stuff in his head, and to make this what would be kind of just your average couple breaking up, coming back together, and finally realizing they didn't have anything anymore, and a lot of the superhero stuff was made up, or do you think it really happened?
Yes. I think it's open to interpretation, but
Sure.
I think it really happened.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, how about you? Do you think it really happened, or do you think this was just a vision into Frank's head of how he's putting it together to deal with the harshness of life?
I think it's definitely a good theory.
Mm-hmm.
It could have actually happened the way that it said, maybe not to the extremes, and as brutally as it did, but I think that a lot of the things that happened in it were very real, very possible. I mean, you can go to a gun range.
Right.
You can pretty much pick up a gun by yourself if you didn't have a disability.
Mm-hmm. A visible one, anyway. No, just kidding.
But there were a lot of things that the superhero just kind of did with things just lying around the house, And so it's entirely possible that someone could do the same damn thing.
Yeah. It does. This one's definitely out of a number of the superhero films we have seen in the past, at least wide release and such. This one really felt a kind of a grounded in reality superhero film, where you're like, well, outside of him getting away with mass murder, outside of that part, you could see this happening and had a very realistic tone to it. So. And there you have it, folks. We're going to wrap it up for tonight for Super. Hope this gave you some food for thought. And if you haven't sought it out yet, I will go down the aisle real quick and get where you can find everyone. But I would recommend it. It surprised me, and I kick myself for not watching it sooner because it is a blast. But it's very mature. It's only for those who don't mind faces and body parts everywhere getting blown up and such. So I think we'll wrap it up tonight. We'll go down the aisle real quick, and people will let you know where you can find them when they are not babbling to me here on the Spoiler Room. Glenn, go ahead. Where can they find you at, sir?
You can find me on Facebook with the B-Movie Bunker, Guy in the Bunker Productions. You can also find me on YouTube, same thing, B-Movie Bunker, Guy in the Bunker Productions. Find me on guyinthebunker.com. Find me on my gaming podcast, The Adventure Party, on gncast.com, or just follow me on Twitter at Guy in the Bunker.
He is everywhere. Look for the BFD. Great stuff there. And David, how about you? Where can they find you at?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Movies Galore Milwaukee, two different things, a group and a blog. And you can also find me on Twitter under the same name. And I guess I'm running a podcast called Inside Movies Galore. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, where I stream onto there as well. So definitely seek me out if you want.
Awesome.
There we go.
Fun podcast. Just definitely check it out. And Paul, where can we find you at, sir?
You can go to ForsakenFilmReviews.com for my latest film reviews. You can also check out my podcast on Film Jerks as well. And if you want to find out more about the Northeast Wisconsin Horror Film Festival, you can go to newhorrorfest.com. We take new film submissions starting January 6th.
Awesome. So indie filmmakers out there, especially those from the great Cheesehead State of Wisconsin, please keep an eye peeled for that. I want to thank you all for listening into our episode today. We appreciate it very much. Please subscribe, comment, and like us. Well, you know the drill. So we're just going to say good night, everyone. Let's just say, was it Shut Up, Evil?
Shut up, evil!
Shut up, crime.
Crime, yes.
Shut up, pedophiles and other bad doers everywhere. Good night, everyone.
Shut up, Holy Avenger.
Shut up, podcasters.